Hello and welcome to the Atlas Agency, a channel all about Arkham Horror the card game by Fantasy Flight Games. I'm your host Brandon, and in this player card rundown, I'll be taking a look at the new player cards in the expansion Threads of Fate, the first Mythos Pack of the Forgotten Age cycle. Threads of Fate is on the lighter side as far as its player card count. It comes with just 10 new player cards, that's 2 per class with no neutral cards, and the pack also has a lower than usual count of leveled up cards. Most Mythos packs have at least one leveled up card for each class, but only 3 of the 10 cards in Threads of Fate cost experience. So let's walk through each of the new cards, starting with the Guardian class and their new level 0 card, Scene of the Crime. Scene of the Crime is an event that costs 2 resources. It has the Insight and Bold traits. Play only as your first action. Discover 1 clue at your location, 2 clues instead if there's an enemy at that location. This action does not provoke attacks of opportunity, so those monsters are going to politely hold off while you bag evidence and trace that chalk outline around the body. It's probably also appropriate for you to rattle off a CSI-style one-liner and throw on some sunglasses as you play this card. We are off to a great start for this cycle of Mythos packs with this card, as this looks to me to be quite good. You get to discover an automatic 2 clues for 2 resources with no test required, and that's a deal that I think I'm going to be pretty happy to take. There is a condition to satisfy to get the full benefit of 2 clues, but it's a really easy one. You basically just have to draw an enemy that spawns with you in the Mythos phase before you take your turn. You can even use the card On the Hunt to try to lure an enemy out whenever you're in a good spot to use this, like a high shroud location. It just looks like a great way for Guardians to better pitch in with the clue gathering, especially lower intellect Guardians like Zoe. So that's Scene of the Crime, again a card I'm pretty happy with. Guardians also get a new level 1 event, Marksmanship. This one costs 2 resources, Tactic trait, Fast. Play when you activate the Fight ability on a firearm or ranged asset. This attack can target an enemy at a connecting location. Ignore the Aloof and Retaliate keywords for this attack. If this attack succeeds against an enemy not engaged with you, the attack deals +1 damage. So there's a couple of different benefits in here, and note that you don't necessarily have to take advantage of all of them. Even if you're targeting an enemy at your own location, you could still make use of the Ignore, Aloof, and Retaliate feature, and as long as the enemy's not engaged with you, you can still get the +1 damage boost. I think everyone's mind jumped to the old Springfield M1903 when they first saw this. The Springfield, in case you've forgotten, is a level 4 Guardian gun from the Dunwich cycle with 3 ammo that gives you +3 combat and deals +2 damage, but it only works on enemies that are not engaged with you. I think the Springfield's pretty much been sitting in binders since the Dunwich cycle. With Marksmanship being a one-shot event, I don't think it's really enough to redeem the Springfield. I think we're probably waiting on 1 or 2 more yet-to-be-seen pieces to complete that puzzle. But I think this card will prove to be decently useful for other weapons. Since you're already probably getting at least +1 damage from your gun itself, this attack should be doing at least 3 damage, and that's going to be enough to fry most aloof enemies in one hit. Not all of them, but most of them, and that includes a certain recurring foe in the Carcosa campaign. And being able to strike anything, aloof or not, from a room away is really nice as well, so I don't think it's going to be hard to squeeze some action efficiency out of this card. It's got cool artwork to boot. It makes me think of Mark Harrigan's backstory, so I like Marksmanship, and I'm looking forward to getting to use the card. This pack gives rogues a new level 0 card for their accessory slot. Lucky Cigarette Case. This one's a 2 resource asset with the Item and Charm traits. After you succeed at a skill test by 2 or more, exhaust Lucky Cigarette Case to draw 1 card. I guess it wasn't enough to just have Wendy able to go drinking, now she can light up a cigarette as well. This is the type of card that doesn't normally get me very excited. That's not to say that it isn't a good card. I actually think that it's fine. It's just that I don't find these types of drip card draw effects to be all that interesting to think about. They're just a means to get to your fun cards. This one does seem like a decent choice for an early rogue accessory if you're looking to boost your draw, especially if you're running something like lockpicks that ups the chances you'll be overshooting tests often. The closest card to compare this with is probably Rabbit's Foot over in the Survivor class, and in that matchup I think I like the Cigarette Case slightly better, especially on standard difficulty. Side note, I think that a really cool Arkham accessory would be a metal deck box based on a vintage cigarette case design like the one in the artwork here. Our other rogue card appeals to me a little more. This is Fence, a level 1 asset that costs 3 resources. It has the Illicit and Connection traits. Looks like it's the first card actually to be labeled as a connection. It doesn't occupy any slot. When you play an Illicit card during your turn, exhaust Fence, the Illicit card gains Fast, If it was already fast, reduce its cost by 1 instead. This is an interesting piece of support for the illicit trait. It's a trait I've kind of been anxious to see explored. We've seen at least one previous rogue card with a similar theme of making things fast, the Dunwich Cycle ally Joey Vigil. Joey doesn't seem to have ended up seeing too much use, but I think this card is maybe a little more likely to find its way into play. It feels like it's a good card for Finn. Fence has the illicit trait itself, so it can be tutored using Finn's Smuggled Goods signature event, and Smuggled Goods itself has the illicit trait as well, so once Fence is in play, you can start playing Smuggled Goods whenever you draw it without having to spend an action. That should really up the value of that signature card, kind of addresses what's currently an issue with it. Of course, you will need a decent number of illicit cards if you want to make this card worthwhile. We do have several useful options at this point already, including Lockpicks, Switchblade 2, Pickpocketing, the 41 Derringer, and Lupara. Liquid Courage 2, though you're probably not running that card in Finn. Hopefully we'll see that list expand a little further over the course of the current cycle. Both of the Survivor cards in this pack are level 0. The first of them is a new skill, Stunning Blow. This one has one combat icon. If this skill test is successful during an attack, automatically evade the attacked enemy. My initial impression is that this doesn't look that exciting to me, especially with just the one icon. I guess it is a useful boss battle card for any enemy that either has Retaliate or that's just too large to take down in a single turn, so it could be a useful tool for a fighting survivor like a Yorick or an Ashcan Pete. I'm still not sure it would make the cut for me personally, especially for Yorick. I find I already have a tough time trimming my Yorick decks down to just 30 cards. I do, however, love the artwork here. If you're looking for a forum avatar, please consider using this guy. I was looking at the other cards by this artist, and I see that he's done Waylay and Blackjack, along with a couple of snake enemies from the Forgotten Age Deluxe box, so I feel like he's successfully merged those two areas of interest here, blunt instruments and snake people, into a fun piece, and maybe that's reason enough to find some space to use the card. The other Survivor card in this pack is Perseverance. This is a 2-resource event, fast. Play when you are assigned damage and or horror that would defeat you. Cancel up to 4 of that damage and or horror. And the card also has a useful set of icons, Double Willpower. Since the main use of the card is conditional on you nearly getting defeated, those icons are especially nice. If you're nowhere near getting knocked out, you should still be able to find a willpower test that you can pitch this to. For a level 0 card, I think this is a pretty handy option. At 2 resources, it's maybe a little pricey. That's not terrible, but it does mean it won't be a good fit for Dark Horse builds. It seems that this should be a really important card for Calvin Wright, since you're going to want to ride as close to defeat as possible with Calvin in order to max out his stat boost. This gives you a little extra safety net on top of your asset-based protection. This one gets a thumbs up from me, and I'm looking forward to trying it out. Next up, we have something that's a little bit different, one of 2 cards in this pack that breaks a little bit of new ground for the permanent keyword. This pack introduces level 0 permanents. The first one we'll look at is Arcane Research for the Mystic class. Permanent, when you purchase Arcane Research, suffer 1 mental trauma. After each scenario of a campaign, reduce the experience cost of the first spell card you upgrade before the next scenario by 1. Some rules points here. Keep in mind that this only applies when you upgrade a spell. It's not simply buying a spell with experience. You have to be upgrading an existing spell card from your deck. So upgrading the level 0 Shriveling to the level 3 version would qualify, but swapping an emergency cash out for level 3 Shriveling would not. Note also that the card you're upgrading, the card you're starting with, has to have the spell trait. That rules out Archaic Glyphs, which only has the spell trait on its upgraded forms. The level 0 version is not a spell. This can reduce the cost of an upgrade to 0. There is not a minimum cost of 1. So for example, if you have 2 of these and you upgrade one Shriveling 3 to a Shriveling 5, that's going to be free. And lastly, note that you are allowed to add this card to your deck at the start of a campaign before playing the first scenario, and that's really the way to do it too, since the effect triggers after each scenario. You want it in play when the first scenario ends. I think that this is a really neat design. It calls back to Mystic's Power at Any Cost theme, much like good old Delve Too Deep. It's cool to see the opportunities for gaining experience grow along with the card pool. I think I said something similar about Karen's Abel from Dim Carcosa, but we've got more stuff than ever before to buy, so getting some extra purchasing power is really nice. Honestly, I feel like this basically filed a sanity point off of all of my Mystic investigators. The question is probably not going to be whether or not I use this when I'm playing Mystic, but whether I use 1 copy or 2. 2 really kicks it into high gear and allows you to do several upgrades with no experience investment at all, or a minimal investment. But 2 trauma right out of the gate is kind of harsh. 1 definitely feels manageable. 2 will probably depend on the investigator and also the group that they're traveling with. If you have someone who can heal the horror off of you, then you may be okay taking that second copy. Right now we have about 7 spell upgrades in the pool, and for each of those you have up to 2 copies to do. Just to list them, we've got Blinding Light 0 to Blinding Light 2, Rite of Seeking 0 to 4, Scrying 0 to 3, Shriveling 0 to 3, and then Shriveling 3 to 5, and finally Ward of Protection 0 to 2, and then 2 to 5. For a standard 8-scenario campaign where you're taking this from the very beginning, it'll trigger 7 times before the final scenario. Just taking both copies of Shriveling from 0 to 3 and then to 5, that alone covers 4 of those 7 triggers. One final thing I wanted to mention, this is definitely a card that needs a full card pool to be worth it. As it stands now, if you don't have the Dunwich cycle, then this isn't going to do you much good. We're likely to get more upgrades as this cycle progresses and throughout future cycles, but at the moment, if Forgotten Age is all you're doing, then you really don't have any need for this card. Next up for Mystics, we have a level 2 event, Counterspell, 2 resources, fast. Play when a Skull, Cultist, Tablet, or Elder Thing Chaos token is revealed during a skill test at your location. Cancel that Chaos token. Do not reveal a new token to replace it. This looks like a pretty nice buy for 2 experience. It's a way to convert a potentially failed test into a success, as long as that failure involves one of these non-auto-fail special tokens. You get to play it in reaction to the test results. You don't have to commit it beforehand. That puts it in the company of cards like Lucky and Sure Gamble, cards I really like to play. If you want to really protect an important test, you can even combo this with the Forgotten Age card Dark Prophecy. That would let you reveal 5 Chaos tokens and pick 1 to resolve, but the one that you resolve has to either have one of these special symbols or the auto-fail symbol. So Dark Prophecy would give you a really good chance at being able to draw one of these symbols that you could then cancel with Counterspell. Another thing to point out, Mystics commonly face negative consequences from their spells when they draw one of these tokens, whether they pass the test or not, so Counterspell could offer you protection from a nasty side effect, even if you were still going to pass the test by the numbers. So for example, if you do a Rite of Seeking activation and draw a Skull, this could save you from having that immediately end your turn. All in all, I think this is a pretty nice tool, and it's one that I expect to be playing. The other level 0 permanent in this pack is Shrewd Analysis for the Seeker class. Limit 1 per deck. Anytime you would upgrade a card with the unidentified or untranslated subtitle, you may upgrade a second copy of that card at no experience cost. If you do, the 2 upgraded versions are chosen at random from among the eligible options. You must still meet all deck building restrictions. So sort of a buy one get one free deal for these cards, with the catch that you give up the ability to pick which versions you're getting. So I guess rogues aren't the only class that can do gambling effects. This one's not quite as exciting to me as Arcane Research, though I do like the flavor of this smug, glowing idiot leaning back, proud of his work when he really just slapped it together haphazardly. Probably didn't even label the Strange Solution Beaker when he was done with it, so you may be getting acid, you may be getting a healing potion, you're just going to have to figure it out in the field. Compared to Arcane Research, this is quite a bit narrower. I don't even always use the unidentified or untranslated cards when I play Seeker. So far we've had 3 assets use these subtitles, 1 per cycle. We had Strange Solution in Dunwich, Archaic Glyphs in Carcosa, and Ancient Stone in Forgotten Age. Ancient Stone we don't yet have any upgrades for. I feel like both of the possible upgrades to Archaic Glyphs from the Carcosa cycle are decent enough that this seems like a fun way to go if you're using those. On the other hand, the gap in quality between Strange Solution, Acidic Ichor, and the other 2 upgrades to Strange Solution is big enough that I probably wouldn't use it with that card. Finally, similar to what I said for Arcane Research, this card's not useful without the card pool to support it. If you're skipping Dunwich and Carcosa and going straight to Forgotten Age, there's nothing you can do with this card for now, at least until we get the Ancient Stone upgrades later in the cycle. And finally, we'll end with a second Seeker card, also level 0. This one is Persuasion, a 2-resource event with the Insight and Trick traits. Parley, choose a non-weakness humanoid enemy at your location and test Intellect 3. This test gets +X difficulty where X is that enemy's horror value. If you succeed, shuffle the chosen enemy into the encounter deck. If the chosen enemy is elite, automatically evade it instead. This is an interesting one. Humanoid-traded enemies are decently common throughout the existing campaigns, maybe a little more common than you might first guess. whether that's ghouls or cultists or lunatics or now serpent people. Some of the criminal enemies from Dunwich even got errata to correct them from human to humanoid, or to add humanoid in the case of the Clover Club pit boss. A lot of humanoids have a horror value of 0, though not all of them, so you may just be testing Intellect 3 or maybe 4 to use this, which is generally pretty manageable. I don't know about the card. Outright shuffling an enemy away is pretty nice, but in general, humanoids tend to have lower health totals, so you're probably not saving too many fight actions. You could probably mind over matter or anatomical diagrams one of these guys and deal with them in maybe 2 actions, and that has the advantage that with those cards you're not limited to just using them on humanoid enemies. Now if we get some humanoids with Vengeance in Forgotten Age, then shuffling them away with this would also work as a way to get them off the board without having to take their Vengeance points. I could see that being useful. I at least like the image of attempting persuasion on snake people as well. I think that's funny. I imagine you've got to bring your A-game hissing for that kind of interaction. One final thought, if you want to be really persuasive, you can break out your Fine Clothes. That cuts the difficulty of this test by 2. Probably not worth running Fine Clothes just for that purpose, but if you're already using it, then it's a nice bonus. That wraps us up for the Threads of Fate player cards. Overall, I was pretty happy with this pack. Mystics and Guardians fared pretty well, and I think their cards from Threads of Fate will see pretty frequent use. Rogues and Survivors did okay, and Seekers seem to have walked away from the pack with the least. I hope you've enjoyed this look, and as always, thanks for watching the Atlas Agency. For more of my Arkham stuff, you can take a look at the other videos on this channel, as well as the site over at atlasofarkham.wordpress.com.